Joining us right now from England, his weekly visit. It's brought to you by Superior Linen Service. Rob Staton joins us from SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Family owned and operated since 1926. Superior Linen Service committed to delivering the highest quality products and service to the greater Puget Sound area. Get your free quote today at suplinen.com. Give him a call, 253-383-2636. Stay updated with Rob's insights, SeahawksDraftBlog.com. It's great. Great content. His video content, his YouTube channel, Rob Staton Football, and follow him on Twitter at Rob Staton. Hi, Rob. How are you?
Good, Puck. Really good. Yeah. Better for the fact that it's a whole week till we have to watch the Seahawks again.
Let's jump right into the Buffalo Bills game. I was just kind of following your remarks on social media, and you were worked up just like a lot of, I think, other people that watch this team over the years. You know, it was as sloppy, undisciplined performance that I have ever seen. Buffalo's a good football team, but boy, because of how you played, you really made it so much easier on them. You've had a few days to react to the Bills game. Opinions hold the same that you had on Sunday. Have they grown worse since then?
Pretty much the same. I think the most disheartening thing is it just looks like last season. You know, it looks like the end of last season when you get a whole coaching staff change and you make some moves in the offseason. You have, you know, especially a very good first draft pick. You expect that if nothing else, you know, you're not expecting they're going to win every week. You know, I think you and I were quite optimistic and thought that they might have a decent season. But, you know, I also anticipated there could be some growing pains with the new staff, not just a rookie head coach, but an offensive coordinator who's never coached in the NFL before. So you kind of expect that there's going to be some ups and downs throughout the year. It looks exactly the same as it did against the Steelers at the end of last season. Wow. They're not physical. They're not tough. They get dominated in the trenches. They can't defend the run. The offense is streaky. They keep saying they want to run the ball, and then they throw it more than any other team in the league. Like, this feels like the end of the Pete Carroll era. And when you watch this now, having made all of these changes, all you can do is kind of sit back and wonder what else needs to change before we finally see something different on the field.
I want to jump into the piece that you wrote at SeahawksDraftBlog.com, a early season blueprint to try and fix the Seahawks offensive line. How do they do it? This is a long-term project, Rob. Before we get, there's some long-term solutions. Is there a quick fix solution at all to try and upgrade this offensive line?
Yes, I think there is a quick fix solution. I was having a look at the free agents who are set to be available in the offseason, and I think there are one or two intriguing options. For example, Ryan Kelly, the center at Indianapolis, is set to be a free agent. He's the kind of physical, grizzled veteran that I think the Seahawks lack on their offensive line. They drafted Tanner Bortolini this season to be the heir apparent to him. So it looks as if the Colts are preparing to make a change next season and that Bortolini will take on that job. So I would go and try and sign Ryan Kelly and have that sort of experienced, proven center. I would then go and have a look at some of these right guards that are going to be available. Is Brandon Scherf going to be cut by the Jaguars? He may well be. You know, go and have a look there. James Daniels, I know he's out for the season for the Steelers, but he has consistently played well when he's been healthy as a right guard. Austin Corbett is going to be a free agent. You know, there are players out there who you could say there's absolutely no reason. Kevin Zeitler's another one who's at Detroit. You know, there's no reason not to go and be very aggressive to sign these players. And if it costs you a little bit more than you typically would be comfortable doing, so what? You have paid a lot of money for someone like Draymond Jones. You've paid a fortune in trades for players like Jamal Adams. How about being overly aggressive on the offensive line for once? So I think you make a couple of veteran additions like that. That gets you going. I think you make calls. And I understand that this is not likely to happen. I'm not suggesting that this is something that is viable. I'm just saying I make the Colts reject a trade offer for Quentin Nelson. Just go to them and say, look, what will it take? We're prepared to be aggressive. And if they say no chance, get stuffed, what's the harm in having that phone call and being told? Make them say no. And then I go and do the same with the Kansas City Chiefs. They're pushed for cap space. They have to pay Trey Smith, their right guard, next year. He's a free agent. There are other free agents. Nick Bolton, the linebacker's a free agent. They might want to make a saving somewhere. If they trade Joe Thuney, who's got 1 year left on his deal next year, it saves them $16 million. Make them say no for Joe Thuney. Go and get proven veteran quality players to play on your offensive line and shift your resource there. And then while you're doing that, go and draft some guys as well. So you've got the players who can step into their shoes in the future. That's what the Eagles have done. They've got a pretty good offensive line. I'd try and copy that.
They have. We've talked about this before on the show, Rob. They have spent draft capital on offensive linemen, and we've gone through it, but they just haven't hit on it for the most part. Now, I think recently, I think they did make a very good pick in Cross. It looked like Lucas was going to be that pick, but again, he's been, dealing with this chronic knee issue, and hopefully he comes back soon. And I know they're targeting the 49ers game for him to come back. But those are, honestly, when you think back on it, those were the two hits here since, 2010, 14 years. And I guess I wonder, and maybe we've talked about this before, just a spitball. I wonder why it's been so difficult for them, to address, the offensive line. Listen, we've talked about in the draft, the guys that they've missed, the drafting of Zach Charbonnet when you could have drafted, who was the guy that they could have drafted instead of Charbonnet that year?
Schmitz.
Yeah. Okay. So there's that. But what I'm getting at is why, when they do draft these guys, they just aren't nailing them, especially in the interior.
Well, I don't want to revise history. I was a big fan of the Damian Lewis pick. I thought he was a top 50 talent. I think part of the problem the Seahawks have had is that they've not been very good at developing players. Mm-hmm. So while the Packers have been very good at drafting players and developing those players to be very good starters, I noticed people were praising Zach Tom, who's their right tackle this week. I was saying, what a player, very good player. Go and get him in. He ended up being a 4th round pick. Seattle took Kobe Bryant instead of him in the 4th round. The Packers have taken him. The feeling was that he was going to have to move from left tackle to center because of his size. He ended up being right tackle. He's one of the best 5 right tackles in the league. The Packers are bringing players in and developing them. The Seahawks should have been doing a better job developing the players they've drafted. But if you remember, to Damian Lewis is a great example of this. He had a fantastic rookie season. Everyone was saying that's the right guard position sorted for the next 8 years. What did they do after his rookie season? Traded for Gabe Jackson. Even though Gabe Jackson had played left and right guard, Gabe Jackson was more comfortable playing right guard. You put him at right guard, and you make Damian Lewis go and play left guard where he's never played before. It took him 2 years to adjust to that. Now he's in Carolina now, having a decent season. If you look at his grades, he's doing okay. He's too expensive, but he's doing okay. It's about drafting and developing. They haven't developed enough of their offensive linemen. And then the other thing is they have just, look, this is not hindsight. When you've done a draft blog since 2008, you've got a fair few receipts. You can point to articles where you said, I like this guy, I like that guy. There's a whole list of draft boards I've got that are published, and people can go back and check them if they want to double check this. They have decided not to take linemen that felt very predictably decent, if not above average to very good. And they opted not to take those players. The most high-profile one, of course, being Creed Humphrey when they took D. Eskridge instead. Mm-hmm. They've had opportunities to draft players. They've passed on them. They've drafted other positions instead, and they're left with a crap offensive line. They have to change this. There's no good coming out every week saying, this is the team we want to be. There's no good appointing a Harbaugh protege and then being finesse. You've got to build the kind of team that you want to be. So the time is up now for doing what they've done. They've got to do something different this offseason.
Well, I'd like to, and I don't know these guys off the top of my head, but I'm just thinking, just out loud, to look back at the 23 draft the 23 draft when they got Devin Witherspoon at 5. Listen, I like Devin Witherspoon. I understand that he can play better. This is not like, hey, Devin Witherspoon, they made a mistake in drafting. I'm just curious, how's Paris Johnson been playing with Arizona?
He's been okay. I mean, I think the 2023 draft is a difficult one. I think and look, there is some misfortune to this, that the Seahawks have ended up picking in the top 10 twice thanks to the Russell Wilson trade and their own ineptitude in one season. And they have not been in a position to draft either a really, really good-looking quarterback, like one we saw playing for the Bills of the weekend. They haven't been able to draft a fantastic that guy's going to be a great offensive lineman for 10 years player. I thought Charles Cross was a second round player, and I think he's been okay. They've not had a chance to draft a great offensive lineman. They've not had a chance to draft an amazing edge rusher or interior pass rusher who can wreck games. It's very unlucky. And with that Witherspoon pick, I think they were somewhat in no man's land. And I would not go back and revise that. I think Witherspoon's been poor this year, but I don't think they had great options at number 5. I think it's in the past. It's often in that day 2 range. It's when they've had opportunities to draft offensive linemen who, like I say, you study them. Because the Seahawks have been banning the offensive line puck, it's the one position I've spent more time sort of watching and scouting the college football for the last 10 years. And you end up sort of seeing these players and you build these draft boards and you speak to all these players. And I could, if I had a long list of all the players, like if I had a depth chart in front of me, I could go him, who the Seahawks haven't drafted. And you don't expect the Seahawks to hit on every offensive line pick or to pick every perfect offensive lineman in the league. No one would expect that. But to not have any hits, to only have Justin Britt be the one offensive lineman that signed a second contract isn't good enough. And then when the GM is coming out and saying, I think interior linemen are overdrafted and overpaid, and you're watching this level of offensive line play, you just end up thinking, I'm sorry, this has to change now. It's time to get the checkbook out, and it's time. Look at me saying checkbook like it's 2001. It's time to get the money out or the Bitcoin, as you were talking about earlier, and go and get some proper offensive linemen.
Where did he play? Where did he say that quote?
It was in an interview with Dave Wyman on 710.
And he said that he just, the philosophy of drafting these interior linemen is just, they get overdrafted. It's not worth it.
I think they were asking him about, I think it was after free agency, when all the money had gone to the Lewises and the Robert Hunt, who got $20 million a year, and they're asking him about it. I don't know if at that point they'd signed Laken Tomlinson or not. Maybe they had, maybe they hadn't. But he was asked about it, and he said that interior offensive linemen are overdrafted and overpaid.
Yeah, you go back to that 01 or that 21 draft. I mean, we've talked about it a lot on this show, and you've brought up, Creed Humphrey a lot, who's out of Oklahoma, gets drafted by Kansas City. I think it's 3 or 4 picks after you take D. Eskridge. And I mean, you just look at it's just first team everything. First team AP, first team Pro Football Writers, first team Pro Football Focus. I mean, he's been unbelievable since he's come into the league. And the one position that you have not been able to solve since you traded Max Unger away to the Saints as center, and he was sitting right there. And D. Eskridge has done nothing in the league, absolutely nothing. And I get it; these guys make mistakes all the time, but especially when you had such a need at that position. And then the Charbonnet year. Who was the player again with Charbonnet? One more time.
John Michael Schmidt.
Okay, and he's where is he again?
He's with the Giants.
That's right. And, it's just, I would disagree with him that, I think the interior line is massively pivotal. Sometimes I think the tackles get too much praise. And I understand where they're drafted, but to devalue interior offensive linemen when you want to be a physical running football team, you better have a center and 2 guards. I don't care what the tackles are. If you want to run up the middle, tackles ain't helping you do that.
Well, let me give you this may make your eyes water. So right. One of the things that I was against the Jamal Adams trade from day one. I couldn't believe what they gave up for him. But when you look back at that trade, the pick that Seattle gave away, their first round pick that became Jamal Adams in that 2021 draft became Christian Darrisaw, who is the Vikings left tackle who's just got injured, but I think we both agree has become a very good NFL left tackle. And even if they didn't want him, they could have taken Landon Dickerson, who is the outstanding, freshly minted interior lineman for the Philadelphia Eagles. They could have, instead of taking D. Eskridge, not just have taken Creed Humphrey, they could have taken Josh Myers, who's a very good offensive lineman for the Green Bay Packers. And there were other players, going into rounds 3 and 4 who have ended up being good players. Kendrick Green was another one who we talked about loads on the blog who with the Steelers, who was physical, was tough. Spencer Brown with the Buffalo Bills. Ben Cleveland's not really worked out, someone I like, but, there were players there. Quinn Miners was somebody. I interviewed Quinn Miners. Can you remember him with the belly at the Senior Bowl? I interviewed Quinn Miners. He went at the end of round 3. He's gone on to become a very, very good interior offensive lineman for the Denver Broncos. That was a draft loaded with offensive linemen. But, they get overpaid and overdrafted. The right thing to do is to trade for Jamal Adams and pay him a fortune.
Yeah, we all know he's a good GM and he's had massive success, but I just wonder though when he makes comments like that and he sees the struggles of this team. I mean, it's obvious to everyone, and it's been obvious to everyone for such a long period of time. They cannot block anyone. They haven't been able. We've been talking about the same storyline with this team for 10 years. They can't block.
Well, here's another thing. This is what I don't get about him, because, as you're right, he's clearly a good GM. The league, I won't hear people say he's a bad GM. This is the man who, with Pete Carroll, created one of the greatest rosters that the NFL has ever seen and won Seattle Super Bowl. He's not a bad GM. But for whatever reason, he's done a bad job with the offensive line. Like I say, he's made mistakes. They've looked in the wrong kind of areas. They've been aggressive for safeties and not for offensive linemen. And look, this is what it comes down to for me. When they were paying Russell Wilson at the peak of his powers, and there was just that bit of unrest starting to build, Puck, between Russell Wilson, Mark Rodgers, and Schneider and the Seahawks. They had an opportunity in an offseason to go and sort out their offensive line. There was Corey Linsley available in free agency, Kevin Zeitler for the first time or the second time because he was traded, and Joe Thuney. And they didn't land any of those players. They had to go and trade for Gabe Jackson. And you could say, well, how can you compete with the Chiefs for Joe Thuney? They gave Joe Thuney a $16 million a year contract. You gave Jamal Adams $17.5 million. That's $1.5 million more. So you were clearly willing to pay that kind of money.
Yeah.
You could have blown the Chiefs out the water. And there wasn't one person in Seattle who would have complained if you'd have gone, Joe, we're going to give you $20 million a year. Don't go and play with Patrick Mahomes. Come play Russell Wilson instead. Everybody would have applauded. I would, you would. 60,000 in Lumen would have supported that move. It would have gone down a storm. But they won't do it because it's not value. But they think it's value to trade the house for Jamal and pay him $17.5 million a year. It's a huge error. And it's one of a number of errors that they've made with the offensive line.
It's weird. It's weird, though, that he would be – I don't take him as someone that would be attracted and in love, Rob, with the shiny car. Like Schneider, where he's from, the Midwest, growing up with the Packers, that he would – those Midwest roots, right, that he understands that, it's cliche. You win the game up front. That he would be more attracted and knows and understands that it's the what's that offensive lineman comp? The old beat up Ford Chevy pickup. That's a badass that still runs over things. It looks like shit, but you know what? It gets the job done. Like he would be more attracted to that, you would think.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because a few months ago, I reached out to someone I know who has worked with Ron Wolf very closely. And I said to him, what is Ron Wolf's philosophy? Tell me a bit about it. And he went, lineman, lineman, lineman. He said, that is what Ron Wolf would just draft the best lineman every time. That was the philosophy that he's come from. Now, I do think there's another side to this, because to play devil's advocate, if you want to put it that way, sure, or if you just want to sort of to try and balance out the argument, I think what he has done since the Russell Wilson trade is really doubled down on a philosophy, which is we're going to focus on high character players. It's why they went nowhere near Jalen Carter. Yeah. We're going to focus on best player available, and we're going to stick to the board. Now, those things make sense to a lot of NFL fans, and I certainly don't think that's a bad thing to do. But in being and sort of sticking to the board, what I think they've done in these last few drafts is they've been able to identify talented players, players with upside. You like Charles Cross, Boya Maffei's worked out. Ken Walker is a talented player, isn't he? And then, Devin Witherspoon, we've seen him play better than this. We know he's talented. There's something there with Jackson Smith and Jigba. There's something there with Derek Cook. Yeah. They've been able to identify talented players. But all this is done by sticking to the board and picking the best player available. They haven't actually built a team. They haven't actually built a team to fit the vision. They've built a team that the draft boards told them to build. So they've ended up with a collection of talented players in non-important positions, but they don't actually have the team that they want. And I think what you have to do is sometimes you have to be like Jim Harbaugh and go, we're an offensive line team. Malik Neighbors is the best player on the board, but we're going to take Joe Alt instead with the 5th overall pick because that's who we are. Yeah. And that's how they've built that team. We're going to get rid of Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. We're going to bring in Bozeman. And then when he tries to decapitate a defender for trying to turn Justin Herbert's leg at the weekend, I'm going to give him a game ball. And the whole fan base is going to celebrate him. I mean, that's just Harbaugh down to a T. I was sat there watching, the Bozeman tackle for the center, and then the Harbaugh game ball ceremony.
Great.
I want that. That's what I want in Seattle. But
he's so uncomfortable, though, when he's giving out those game balls. Don't you agree?
Oh, look, he's a zany guy. Like he is. I don't think I could handle him. But I don't want him. I want
You want the philosophy.
Yeah, we've appointed someone who's worked with him. Like I want that. I want angry, horrible.
But that's the thing,
people
though,
in the trenches.
Is they got, at least, I think in theory, because of where he came from, they got a head coach that I think subscribes to that. Baltimore is a physical, wants to run it, and they want to beat you up. But
that's why it's going to be the acid test. Because I think now they've had to have this season to realize they've got to do things differently. And that's what I hope, is that they will go into the offseason and go, enough is enough.
Yeah.
We've got to attack this offensive line. We've got to be better in the trenches. And that's why I hope there's no more false dawns this year. I don't mind winning games like they did in Atlanta. I want the Seahawks to win every game.
Yeah.
What I don't want is to win like the last two, not make the playoffs, and everyone think everything's great because they won the last two games. I want them to go, whatever happens this year, playoffs, no playoffs, NFC West title, no NFC, 4th place in the NFC West, whatever happens, please fix the offensive line.
I just think it's, there was a comment this morning. I was flipping on one of the morning talk shows, and I just happened to catch Dominique Foxworthy, who was on ESPN, and they were going over their Super Bowl predictions, and they were revisiting what they said in the beginning of the year. And Foxworthy said, first thing in giving, and I can't even remember who the team that he picked, but he goes, the first thing I look at when I predict who I think will be playing in the Super Bowl, back in August, is what's their offensive line look like? That's it. That's just, what does their offensive line look like? How good is it? Who'd they add? What do they, where is it? How does it stack up? That's the first thing he looks at. And it's not sexy for fans, and I get it. You get in love, you get enamored with D. Eskridge and the position players. And it's not fun to draft an offensive lineman in the first round or the second round or the third round because it's offensive line play. It's boring. But And I don't know if Schneider gets caught up in that. I don't think he does. That would be foolish to say. I mean, he understands how to build a football team, but man, it is the most basic thing I think of all of the sports out there. That if you just can't draft that and develop it, you're just not going to win consistently. And it's the same thing in like college football. Jed Fish at Washington is going through the same thing, and he said it earlier this week, and just talking about how they can't be the team they want to be because of their offensive line. And he goes, we can't focus in on the portal for offensive line because for the most part these are guys that aren't starting at their schools, they're backups, or they're at smaller schools. We bring them here, and it's the really good ones, there's going to be high competition for them. It's just like free agency, that we have to find these guys in high school and develop them. And it's the same thing in the pros. You got to draft these guys and develop these guys. It's all got to work together.
Well, if the Seahawks had come out, if John Schneider and Mike Macdonald had come out and said, we want to be the greatest show on turf, we want to bring back the high-octane passing finesse offense, then I'd have no problem with it. I think it's the biggest issue is that the identity that they claim to want to have is completely opposed to the team they've actually built. And that's what makes it really, really difficult. And this is obviously the team that John Schneider and Pete Carroll built more so than Mike Macdonald, because he's only been here 1 year. But let me read you, Puck, the top 6 cap hits for this season. Top 6 cap hits on the Seahawks this year. Second is Tyler Lockett. Third is DK Metcalf. Sixth is Noah Fant. So half of your top 6 cap hits are on 2 receivers and a finesse pass catching tight end. And Geno Smith, the quarterback, is the top one. The only 2 linemen who are amongst that top 6 are Draymond Jones, who's been awful, and Leonard Williams. So therein lies the problem. Like next season, the top cap hits cannot be people like Noah Fant. The top cap hits need to be a guard, and it might not be a particularly exciting guard. It just needs to be somebody who can, I don't know, run block. And then the other thing they've got to do is they've got to defensively, look, we're talking a lot about the offensive line, rightly so.
It's good. It's the offensive line show of record.
Yeah, but the defense has got to find out some solutions here, because that's the one thing is they have actually spent a lot of money on the defensive line. You know, Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, Draymond Jones, Jaron Reed, Jonathan Hankins, 2 second-round picks at edge rusher. Uchenna Nwosu has been injured, obviously. To be as bad as they are on defending the run is unacceptable. You cannot win games of football playing this way. There isn't a team that looks like Seattle defending the run right now. It is embarrassing to watch. So, yes, they need to fix the offensive line. I think a bit of pressure has to be applied to Mike Macdonald and his staff to fix the defense. And the reason I think the big problem is here, Puck, is that Mike Macdonald did not have a rich contacts book when he became an NFL head coach. He'd only been a defensive coordinator in the NFL for 2 years. I don't think he expected the year before he became the Seahawks head coach to be in the running for these jobs, because he wasn't on anybody's radar in the media. So he's been thrust into this position. They had to do a lot of interviews. Like Jim Harbaugh knew that Greg Roman was going to be his offensive coordinator 17 seconds after he accepted the job. Mike Macdonald had to interview offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators. He'd never met Adam Dirty before. He'd never met Ryan Grubb before. He didn't have the contacts. And there aren't enough people, in my opinion, on his defensive staff who know how to coach his scheme. It's as much a learning curve for them as it is for the players. And I think that's a problem. I think they've got to go out in this offseason and get somebody who knows this scheme. And the name they should go out and get, in my opinion, is Wink Martindale. He is the mentor for Mike Macdonald. He's at Michigan right now. He's basically having a year in college football because that was the gig that was available to him. Bring Wink Martindale in to come and support Mike Macdonald and have another body in the building who understands this defensive scheme to sort it out. You can call him assistant head coach if you want. You can make him the defensive coordinator, whatever it is. Open that Bitcoin book again and go and get Wink Martindale in the offseason and bring him in.
It's not real. You know it's not real.
I'm with you. Don't worry.
It's just not real. Stop. And I don't want to hear anybody tell me it's real. It's not real. Yeah, I just, this is the up and down nature, I think, of this football team every week. And it's okay to be up and down. I think one week you can be all excited about what they're doing, and the next week you can be down on it. I think even when we were excited what they did in Atlanta, I think you still acknowledge, the holes on this football team. That's, you and I went back and forth on it. Like, I want them to get to the postseason. I want them to win it. To get into the postseason. I want them to experience the playoffs. But I still do. And your point was I don't want to see them in the playoffs. It's just I don't want them to get in and then think like everything is great in the world. They've got no issues. I totally understand. I totally get that, because even if they were to sneak in at 9-8 or 10-7, which I think they're capable of doing, it does not solve the number one issue with them, which has been the number one issue for a decade, is that they are soft up front on both sides of the football.
Can I, because this, obviously we've done a lot of talk about negative things. Can I give you a bit of light to this offensive line?
Yeah, yes.
So on top of the fact that there are some veterans who are going to reach the market, Zeitler at right guard, Daniels at right guard, Cobbett at right guard, and Ryan Kelly at center, who in particular are the names that I would, and possibly Brandon Scherf and maybe one or two others who will get cut. So there are going to be some options there. In the draft, I think, it's not a rich, deep offensive line draft, but there are some players, if people want to go and check these players out, they are, that you can go and watch them on YouTube. Go and have a look at Tyler Booker, left guard at Alabama. He is ready-made for the NFL. Big, 325 pounds, 5-star recruit. Very, very intense, great, very mature individual, the heart and soul of the Alabama team. They need a few more guys like him, quite frankly, on that Alabama team. He is a dude. I think if I was going to do a mock draft today, Puck, and I don't do them because they're pointless in October, But if I was going to do one today, Tyler Booker would be the guy that I would pair with the Seahawks. So I think, he can come in and he can start at left guard next year. If they keep losing, they'll be in contention for Kelvin Banks, the Texas left tackle who's going to move inside to guard. There's Josh Connolly at Oregon. There's Donovan Jackson at Ohio State. There's people like Jonas, I can't pronounce his second name, Savanea, I think it is, or something like that at Arizona, who's going to move inside to guard. Dylan Fairchild at Georgia. Very good, aggressive, physical blocker, wrestling background. And then at center, you've got Logan Jones. You've got Jake Majors. You've got Jared Wilson. You've got Josh Kreutz. There are players in this draft who you can bring in to help support your offensive line. So I'd like to see a combination of veterans coming in and an influx of talent in terms of the draft to really sort this out, because until they sort it out, they're not going to be a proper football team. They're not going to be the kind of team they want to be. And there are other issues. They've still got to add to the defense. I still think they need to start investing in young quarterbacks. They can't just keep going year to year with Geno Smith and whoever they can bring in back in as a backup. There has to be a plan for the future. So they're going to have to draft someone eventually. But right now, it's very hard to look at this offensive line and think, how on earth have they ended up in this situation again?
Yeah, and I don't want, here's the thing. We get in the discussion. They don't have to do anything in terms of a financial, commitment to Geno Smith. I don't want to see any significant capital spent on him, significant capital that puts him in the upper tier. And again, this is not a indictment on Geno. I think he's a fine quarterback. He throws a pretty ball, and I think, and what I'd like to see is what he would look like with to steal your phrase, a proper offensive line. Okay. But you know what? You can't get that proper offensive line if you're going to pay him the amount of money that he and his agents want. You just won't. You can't afford it. And so, and I hope he would realize that. He can certainly get some money, but he can't get paid what he thinks he deserves. And I think therein lies some of the issues with him, as we maybe just transition here a little bit to Geno, is that, the frustration I think he has shown away from the field, on the field, coming off the field, sidelines, throwing footballs at people, yelling at wide receivers on the field, appears to be crying on the benches. I think that he's under a lot of pressure. I think he came into this year thinking, I'm going to be in this high-flying offense, okay, with Ryan Grubb. He's going to make me a lot of money because I'm going to put up some crazy numbers. Because we're going to be throwing, we got this new offensive attack. I see it on paper. I see it on film. Look what Michael Penix did last year. We're going to do the same thing here this year. He doesn't have the offensive line. That's the biggest problem. And at the end of the year, I'm going to lead almost every statistical category in the NFL, and I'm going to get paid. And I think that's a lot, if not the 100% of the problem why he's acting the way he's acting.
Without a shadow of a doubt. And the other thing that I think is probably affecting him right now is that because, escalators in a contract can be a great motivating factor. And it can also help you get a player to be a little bit cheaper than they'd otherwise would be with the carrot of going to earn more money by performing. And a few games into the year, he looked like he was going to tick pretty much all of those escalators and was going to earn possibly like another $10 million for his performance. And a few weeks later, I'm not sure he's going to hit any of them. Maybe the yardage one he will hit and that's it. And that will be affecting him. So I think he is a player who wears his heart on his sleeve. I think that's probably good in the locker room before a game. He probably stands in the middle and gets everyone going. But then during the game, when things go wrong, it's an absolute nightmare. Yeah. And that you can't have your quarterback throwing a football at a defensive lineman, petulance. You can't have him having a sulk and needing DK Metcalf of all people to go over and calm him down. Like you can't be this just cannot be happening. And I'm afraid to say that his performances, it's probably one of the most maddening thing about the Seahawks fan base is that there is such extreme opinions on Geno Smith. But I really think the idea that he needs to be paid a massive contract just needs to stop. It just needs to stop. Like, he's under contract for next year. They're going to go year to year with this guy. He's going to be 35 next year. He's got a cap hit next year of something like $38 million. They just need to go into next year and then into the offseason, and they need to make a call. And they're going to have to make a call. Do we want to go for another year of Geno, or do we want to move on? And I'm afraid to say it. Like, I know there's a lot of people going to hate me saying this, but it might be better for the Seahawks to save money at quarterback, invest in that offensive line, and either just turn it over to Sam Howell, who will have had a year in the system, or go and draft somebody and be cheaper at quarterback. Because, it might be that you're worse at quarterback next year. It'd be quite possible that is the case. But you're either on the path to glory or you're not. And I'm afraid paying Geno Smith $40 million a year and being a 500 team and being streaky and everything like this, maybe this part of the bigger rebuild needs to be not paying a quarterback for a little while.
Yeah, I would be hesitant with Sam Howell. I don't think there's anything there.
I don't either.
I don't think there's anything there with him.
I think what you could do though is you could look for the next Sam Darnold or the next Geno Smith.
He's a free agent.
Or Baker Mayfield. These players who have failed and then have been given a second chance and have done okay and have provided value. Like maybe you should go and find somebody like that. Or maybe you just draft somebody.
Well, Darnold is a free agent.
Yeah. I think he'd be quite pricey.
His market value, according to Spotrac, would be 4 years, $133 million.
Wow. That's quite a change for him in the last 7 months.
You think?
There'll be others, though. There'll be others.
Justin Fields?
I've never been a fan. I think there will be other players, though. There'll be players who, we're seeing it now. You've seen, Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson both been benched. There are going to be players out there that you could. And look, listen, like I say, you may have to take a step back at quarterback.
I found one. You know who's a free? Who's a free agent?
Go on, who?
Say it. Come on.
Well, yeah, I know who you're going to say it's Russell Wilson.
Do it. Bring him back.
I'm pleased for Russ, man.
Come on, Rob. Would you do it right now if he's available? Hold on, just answers. Would you bring Russell Wilson back?
Yeah, I would. I mean, like the way he's playing right now. Yeah, I mean, like, but it has to, it's never going to happen because Mark Rodgers and John Schneider won't. They probably got like a restraining order out on each other.
Never say never. Never say never.
Oh, man.
Can you imagine if they did?
Well, listen, he turned up to Pete's farewell. Like there's, I mean, it'd be a great story, wouldn't it? I mean, like imagine if you had a good season in Pittsburgh and Pittsburgh go, do you know what? We're going to take Shadir Sanders or something instead. We're going to move on, right? And then Russell came back and just finished his career in Seattle with a decent season as a transition to whatever's next. I mean, it'd be a nice story, wouldn't it? I mean, look, some people are going to love it. Some people are going to hate it. But you know what? It'd be a great story. I don't think there's any chance, but it would be a nice, romantic story. Oh, my God.
I would eat it up. I would eat it up if they brought him back. I would just... It would be fantastic theater. For what we do... Forget the football stuff. Oh my God. They went back and said, hey, wouldn't you want to come back home? Come on. We get the catchphrases back. We get the press conference where he names the entire team. We get the videos with Sierra back. Oh God.
Do you think they do it? Do you think they like do another, hey Seattle, we got a deal.
Hey Seattle. Hey Seattle, we're back. I mean, come on.
I'd be all for it. And I don't think Russ would be the problem. I think Russ could probably. There's a chance that Russ and John could maybe sort of patch things up. But whether the agent could or not, I'm not sure. But it'd be a great story. And when I was watching the game the other day, and I'm seeing him throw those deep passes downfield, in a proper, in exactly the. By the way, the offense that the Seahawks won. They're playing Seahawks football in Pittsburgh. And that you think, and he's being the point guard, and you're thinking, I'm jealous of that. I was jealous of the way Tomlin was looking at him and looking with the glint in his eye, like that's my boy. It's good. I enjoyed everything about the game the other day, and I'm glad for Russ. It looks like he's going to have a good season. I'm pleased for him, and if he was the right price, I would not hate it. I mean, why not? Why the hell? Why the hell not?
I'm telling you,
it's not going to happen though.
You imagine the content we would have. Are you kidding me? Oh my God.
I like it when guys come back. Like I liked it when Marshawn came back for that random 6 weeks. I can remember sitting at the breakfast table. This is going to make me seem really strange. Like getting quite emotional that Marshawn had come back. Like I was like the Seahawks did that run out of running backs. They were pretty much on the brink of giving me a call and saying, "Have you ever run for 3 yards a carry?" Like, and then just Marshawn came back in the hour of need, and it just thought. I thought, oh, this is amazing. This is what sport's about. It's stories like this.
Yeah.
And there would be something that would make, and do you know what? All of the people who fell out with him and didn't like him and all that, they'd be right back on board.
All in.
They would. They'd be straight back in there.
They would be all in. All right. Rob Staton, every week brought to you by Superior Linen Service, family owned and operated since 1926, committed to delivering the highest quality products and service to the greater Puget Sound area. Get your free quote today at suplinen.com. Give them a call, 253-383-2636. Follow Rob up on Twitter at Rob Staton, his YouTube channel, Rob Staton Football, all of his work, including a long article on how to fix the offensive line up at SeahawksDraftBlog.com. You can catch this episode on YouTube. Please like and subscribe. Leave comments there, please, including your thoughts on Russell Wilson. Also, listen to it up on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. And, of course, up at PuckSports.com.